My beloved soul, before a single word sinks into your spirit, breathe. Not shallow, not rushed, breathe like your lungs are remembering what freedom tastes like. Something is about to click inside you that has been waiting a very long time. There is a truth you were never meant to discover early. A truth someone hoped you would never see. But it is time. And if you stay with me to the final line, you won't just understand. And yet, even in the exit, they never fully let go. Their silence wasn't closure. It was control. Their distance wasn't peace. It was panic. Because the moment you started healing, the story they told themselves could no longer hold weight. My beloved soul, don't skip. This next part is where the truth sharpens. They did not leave because they stopped caring. They left because caring required effort they were not built for. They did not detach because the connection was weak. They detached because connection requires consistency, and consistency demands a self-awareness they refused to develop. So they performed confidence. They staged happiness. They posted distractions. They sought validation instead of transformation. Every picture, every status, every sudden burst of energy was not proof of moving on, it was proof of hiding. Because people who heal grow quietly. People who run perform loudly. You were not watching someone rise. You were watching them avoid. And yet, here you are. Heart bruised, but awake. Ache present, but fading. Confusion clearing like fog dissolving at dawn. Something in you knows this was never rejection, it was redirection. This ending was not theft. It was protection. You were being pulled away from a place where your heart was starving to be understood. If you stayed, you would have become fluent in self-abandonment. If you stayed, you would have learned to settle for emotional crumbs. If you stayed, you would have forgotten your own worth by trying to prove it to someone unequipped to receive it. Spiritually, emotionally, energetically, this separation saved more of you than the relationship ever gave. My beloved soul, listen closely. Healing isn't about forgetting them. Healing is about remembering yourself. Not the version of you that begged, explained, or hoped. The version of you that exists underneath the survival patterns. The version that is rising now. And if you feel something shifting in you as these words land, that is not imagination. That is reclamation. That is your spirit stepping back into its own skin. Stay with this message. Like, subscribe, whatever it takes to keep this clarity close, not for me, but for the part of you that refuses to go back to confusion. My beloved soul, don't rush this. Something in you is waking up. You can feel it, like a door in your chest opening, like truth cracking through the noise you've been trained to tolerate. Stay with this message, because what comes next explains the part you could never make sense of, why their behavior after the separation looked nothing like the story they tried to tell. From the outside, they acted unaffected. They acted confident. They acted finished. But emotional detachment acted like a costume, not a state of being. And costumes always slip when the room gets quiet. What you witnessed wasn't strength, it was strategy. Distance became a weapon, silence became a statement, mixed signals became control. They needed you uncertain because certainty would have freed you. They needed you confused because clarity would have closed the connection. They needed to leave the door half open because fully closing it would mean admitting they were the one who failed to stay, not you. My beloved soul, this is where the spell breaks. Their behavior after the ending revealed more about their emotional capacity than any apology could have. People who are healed communicate. People who are afraid manipulate. People who are ready take responsibility. People who are unprepared create chaos to avoid accountability. This is why one day they hovered near you emotionally, and the next day they vanished. That wasn't love ending, that was a wounded ego trying to regain control. It was never about losing feelings, it was about losing power. They knew you were slipping from their hands, not because someone else entered your life, but because you began entering your own. And when you stopped chasing, something in them panicked. When you stopped explaining, something in them felt exposed. When you stopped performing your worth, something in them realized they were running out of excuses. Silence became louder than every conversation you ever had, and for the first time, they had to sit with themselves without you softening the discomfort. Your absence forced the emotional mirror they avoided. And mirrors don't lie, my beloved soul, they reveal. They didn't miss the relationship. They missed the version of themselves they got to be when you carried the emotional weight. They missed the comfort of being understood without having to evolve. They missed the safety you offered without demanding growth. What they lost was not ownership, they never owned you. What they lost was access. Access to your vulnerability. Access to your loyalty. Access to the emotional shelter they didn't know how to protect. Let this settle in you, you were not abandoned. You were mishandled. You were not unchosen. You were underestimated. And underestimated love becomes unforgettable. This is why the story isn't over for them. Not in their mind. Not in their memory. Not in the quiet moments when no one is watching. Regret does not always look like, "I'm sorry." Sometimes it looks like them checking your profile in the dark just to feel close to the version of you they can no longer reach. Sometimes it looks like them avoiding you because your growth exposes everything they refuse to fix. Sometimes it looks like a new connection that lacks depth, built on distraction instead of healing. They didn't replace you, they replaced the responsibility of having to rise to meet you. And now, your expansion threatens the narrative they told themselves. If you heal, they were wrong. If you grow, they misjudged you. If you thrive, the story they built collapses. Your progress is proof. Your boundaries are proof. Your peace is proof. And proof terrifies people who need denial to survive. So if you sense resentment when you shine, if you feel tension when you detach, if you notice discomfort when you succeed, understand, their soul feels what their mouth will never say. But hear me clearly, their emotional journey is not your assignment. Their healing is not your homework. Their realization is not your responsibility. You don't need to be the evidence that teaches them. You don't need to be the lesson that changes them. It is not your job to stay where growth is unwelcome just so someone else doesn't feel abandoned. My beloved soul, abandonment does not occur when you walk away. Abandonment occurs when someone loses the privilege of you and pretends it was their choice. Take a breath. You are not losing. You are remembering. You are not breaking. You are breaking patterns. And patterns are the chains that generation after generation called love. But you, beloved soul, are the one who stops the cycle here. If you've read this far, like, save, subscribe, anchor this message into your spirit so this clarity doesn't slip away. Not for content. For confirmation. My beloved soul, don't look away now. Something important is about to be revealed, and if you absorb it fully, the hold this connection has on your mind, your heart, and your identity will begin to loosen. Not because you stop caring, but because you finally see the architecture of the dynamic for what it was, not a love story that failed, but a spiritual contract that expired. You entered that relationship as one version of yourself, and you are leaving it as another. Something ended, yes, but something else began, the moment you decided not to shrink to keep the connection alive. This next truth might sting, but it will save you. They were not threatened by losing you. They were threatened by you realizing you never needed them to feel whole. The moment your self-worth began to move inward instead of orbiting around their validation, the balance shifted. They felt the ground change. They felt their emotional influence weakening. They felt your light returning to you. And instead of rising with you, they recoiled. Because your strength didn't intimidate them, it exposed them. Exposed the places they refused to grow. Exposed the emotional shortcuts they relied on. Exposed the immaturity they decorated as independence. My beloved soul, don't skip. This is where understanding becomes empowerment. Every time you tried to communicate, they treated clarity like conflict. Every time you asked for stability, they treated consistency like a trap. Every time you showed emotional depth, they treated it like pressure. They weren't overwhelmed by you, they were overwhelmed by the accountability required to stand next to someone like you. So they labeled your honesty as intensity. They labeled your depth as demand. They labeled your transparency as neediness. Not because it was true, but because if they could convince you to doubt yourself, they wouldn't have to confront what they lacked. But now, the illusion is collapsing. You've stopped negotiating your value. You've stopped shrinking your needs to fit their comfort zone. You've stopped mistaking emotional crumbs for connection. And without you trying to hold the structure together, the entire dynamic falls apart. That is not your failure. That is the natural consequence of imbalance. Relationships built on your effort alone do not break, they crumble the moment you stop holding them up. My beloved soul, I need you to hear this without looking away. You were never asking for too much. You are asking the wrong person. The right soul would not need to be convinced that your heart is worth staying for. The right soul would not turn communication into a battlefield. The right soul would not treat intimacy like a threat or truth like a burden. Love does not hide. Love does not punish. Love does not disappear when it is needed most. Love leans in. Love repairs. Love evolves. You were ready for evolution. They were addicted to escape. Two different directions. Two different destinies. And the ending was not a sign that you failed, it was a sign that you finally aligned with your own becoming. If you had stayed, resentment would have replaced affection. Silence would have replaced connection. You would have started betraying yourself in the name of keeping someone else comfortable. That is not love. That is spiritual erosion. And your soul refused to erode. Now, something miraculous is happening inside you. The attachment is thinning. The narrative is breaking. Your nervous system is learning safety outside of them. You are rebuilding identity where codependency used to live. Grief is not a setback. It is proof that your spirit is detoxing from an emotional structure it outgrew. Healing is not forgetting them. Healing is remembering you. And if part of you still wonders whether they'll return, whether they'll apologize, whether they'll finally understand, release the timeline. If they come back healed, you won't fear it. If they come back the same, you won't choose it. That's what growth does. It doesn't stop you from loving someone. It stops you from abandoning yourself to love them. Take a breath. Save this message. Like it if it anchors you. Subscribe if you want the strength to remember this when your heart forgets. Not out of obligation, but out of alignment. My beloved soul, stay with me. What comes next is the turning point, the moment you stop asking why they left and start understanding why you were never meant to stay. Not because the love was fake, but because the version of you that chose them could not survive the version of you that is being born now. You are outgrowing the emotional environment where your spirit once settled for less than it needed. You are leaving the room where your heart whispered while their fears shouted. You are walking out of the story where confusion was called passion and inconsistency was mislabeled connection. This is where you remember who you are without their interpretation of you. They did not leave because you were unworthy. They left because remaining would demand evolution. And evolution was the one thing they feared more than separation. People who are not ready for transformation often disguise avoidance as indifference. They pretend stillness is peace when it's really paralysis. They call emotional shutdown maturity when it's really self-protection. They convince themselves that walking away is strength when in truth, it's surrender to their own limitations. My beloved soul, don't skip this. You were never too much for the right heart. You were only too transparent for someone hiding from themselves. If they truly found peace in your absence, they wouldn't need so many distractions to fill the silence. Peace is quiet. Avoidance is loud. You can hear the difference if you listen not to their words, but to their patterns. Confident people don't perform happiness. Healed people don't weaponize distance. Emotionally mature people don't create wounds and then call them misunderstandings. What hurt you wasn't the ending, it was the performance they staged to avoid acknowledging it. They built a narrative where they didn't have to face their own reflection. But reflections don't disappear just because someone closes their eyes. You, however, you opened yours. And now you see the truth that terrifies the version of them that stayed small. Closure was never theirs to give. It was always yours to claim. Closure is not an apology. Closure is the moment you stop negotiating your value with someone who can't afford it. Closure is when you understand that love that costs self-respect is too expensive to keep. Closure is what happens when heartbreak becomes instruction instead of identity. Look at you now. Your spirit is rearranging itself. Your boundaries are forming like armor forged from the lessons you bled for. Your intuition is louder than your loneliness. You are not chasing anymore. You are choosing. And choice is where your power returns. When you stop begging for clarity and start building it. When you stop waiting for their realization and start living your own. When you stop grieving the story you wanted and start honoring the life that is actually unfolding. My beloved soul, there is something sacred happening inside you right now. You are not just healing, you are recalibrating. Your standards are evolving. Your heart is upgrading. Your soul is stepping into alignment with the future that connection was blocking. You could not take that person with you into the next chapter because they were tied to the version of you that doubted your worth. The path ahead requires a self-concept they were never capable of reflecting back to you. That is why the separation was not cruelty. It was initiation. The spiritual contract between you has ended. And contracts end when the lesson is learned. You are not being punished. You are being promoted. And with every breath, you are stepping into the you that existed before the longing, before the confusion, before the emotional negotiations. The you who remembered that love is not meant to feel like losing yourself. If this is resonating, anchor it, breathe it in. Save it. Like this. Subscribe so the part of you that's waking up right now has somewhere to return when your heart gets tired. Not to chase validation, but to protect transformation. My beloved soul, this is the moment everything turns. Not because the past changes, but because the way you carry it does. You are not here to rewrite what happened. You are here to rewire what it meant. The chapter you've been holding onto was not a home, it was a hallway. A transition. A threshold between the person you were and the person you are becoming. You were never meant to stay there. You were meant to pass through. That relationship was not the destination. It was the initiation. It opened something in you that you didn't know needed to rise until it was forced to. You tried to grow with someone who was only trying to survive themselves. You tried to build with someone who was still trying to patch cracks with denial. You tried to love someone who was still running from the kind of love they prayed for when they were younger. There is a tragedy in that, yes, but also a liberation. Because life is not punishing you. Life is protecting you. Every unanswered message, every distant response, every cold moment that left you confused, all of it was redirection. Not failure. Not rejection. Protection wearing the mask of disappointment. You were not left behind. You were removed from misalignment. Now, your spirit is learning a different language. A language where peace is not earned through suffering. Where love does not feel like anxiety disguised as attachment. Where connection does not require self-abandonment. Where your worth is not measured by someone's emotional availability. Where the right person does not arrive as a test, but as confirmation. The kind of confirmation that feels like exhaling for the first time in years. My beloved soul, emotional detachment is not about becoming numb. It is about becoming sovereign. It's not the absence of feeling, it's the absence of giving your power away to what already proved it can't hold it. Detachment is the art of returning energy back to yourself. Detachment is choosing not to bleed for what refuses to heal. Detachment is remembering, without reopening. Detachment is caring, without clinging. Detachment is love without self-abandonment. And right now, this is the chapter where your nervous system learns safety again. Safety in solitude. Safety in certainty. Safety in your own hands. There will still be moments where memories sting, and that is okay. Pain does not mean you are going backwards. Tears do not mean you are failing. Emotional echoes are not instructions to return. They are reminders of how far you've come. Let memories pass through like weather, not architecture. Let them move without letting them build. You do not need to burn the past to move forward. You only need to stop unpacking your bags there. What comes next is not a replacement for what left. It is alignment. A connection that meets you, not drains you. A love that feels like clarity, not confusion. Someone who speaks the language of presence, not performance. Someone who doesn't fear your depth because they have depth to meet it. Someone who doesn't run from accountability because they are strong enough to hold it. Someone who sees you not as potential, but as choice. And when that person comes, you will not mistake inconsistency for excitement. You will not confuse longing for connection. You will not negotiate your needs just to feel chosen. You will not hand over the key to your peace just to keep someone from leaving. You will know the difference now. Because this ending taught you. This pain trained you. This release refined you. My beloved soul, you are not closing a door. You are stepping through one. You are not losing a person. You are losing a pattern. And patterns are heavier than people. Release them both. Not with anger. Not with bitterness. But with understanding. Understanding is freedom. And freedom is where your future begins. If this message is activating something in you, hold it. Like it. Save it. Subscribe so that the strength you feel right now does not fade when the world gets loud again. Not for me, for the version of you who refuses to return to a life that required self-betrayal to feel loved. Now breathe. The chapter is closed. The lesson is integrated. The story continues, but without the weight. You are not behind. You are becoming. And what is meant for you will not require confusion to keep it. My beloved soul, step forward. The door is open.